welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker, and I continue to go through the teams that have been slain in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we missed a couple teams in the first round, and that being St. Louis and Montreal, who ironically have made a trade today, so we'll jump on that Jake Allen deal as well. We'll also talk about the Boston Bruins. We thought we'd have more teams. We waited a couple extra days thinking there's got to be a few of these teams that get knocked off in 5. And, of course, everyone goes and wins. Colorado stays in it. The Flyers are still in it. Vancouver's still in it, thanks to a valiant effort from Thatcher Demko. And so we've got 3 teams to talk about what they're going to do in the offseason. We'll kind of cover some recent rumors that are going on, and we'll give our predictions for some of these Game 6s. So, Justin, let's just jump right into this Jake Allen trade since it just happened earlier today. Jake Allen goes to the Montreal Canadiens along with a 7th-round pick in 2022 for a 3rd-round pick and a 7th-round pick in 2020.
Yeah, interesting trade. It's funny, like, going into this offseason, out after the playoffs, I keep hearing that the goalie market is going to be just a carousel, right? There's going to be a lot of movement. Jake Allen's one name I really didn't think, like, initially, right, was gonna be on the move. I thought maybe St. Louis would kind of ride him out, maybe see where they are with Jordan and see how things go there, and maybe make a decision if they want to try to bring Jake Allen back, because in today's NHL, having a 1-2 punch we've seen is very, very valuable, right? Sure,
it's very valuable, but they are now spending $14.85 million for the next 2 years on goaltenders.
Yeah, Montreal spending a bit of cash. Can't really blame them, though, because they do have $18 million in cap, and really the only guy they got to re-sign is Max Domi, right? So for me, this is a smart move for St. Louis, because you get a guy who's going to be a UFA and likely not going to be back unless, St. Louis could have worked some sort of magic, which, again, I don't even think is possible.
Sure, and St. Louis really needed the cap space.
Right, and that's the thing. You got a right-handed defenseman named Alex Pietrangelo who's going to be a UFA that they're desperately trying to sign. Now, again, $4 million doesn't open up enough to where they...
Well, it does. It does for the offseason. It opens it up.
Sure.
Because you can go 10% over the cap. So
right. And
technically right now they could go $14 million and they'd be okay.
Yeah, I think, what is it, that they're... Even after this move, I think they've got about $6 million in cap space.
6.3 million. About 6.4.
Okay,
roughly.
Yeah. So, again... You can go up to 14, but still, I think St. Louis isn't done. Like Toronto, I think these are 2 teams that are poised to make more moves, to move some more guys. You're looking at St. Louis and you think, okay, they've got a few guys maybe that are a year out, like a Tyler Bozak and Alexander Steen, who make a pretty penny, who you could easily move. And then there's another guy, in my opinion, who I think would be the smartest and might get you the most in return, and that's Justin Falk.
Yeah, but the problem is, now you've just signed Justin Falk to a big deal. I don't know if it's good form to sign a guy to a big extension and then just deal him. I think that would come back to, potentially someone goes, they don't really care, I
don't know necessarily if it's that they don't really care, but I think, obviously they want to take care of Pietrangelo, and the easiest way to find some money is to move Justin Falk, because, again, I think maybe this is almost like insurance, right? If we can't get Alex Pietrangelo signed, and, again, like you said, you have that extra wiggle room of $14 million. If they can't get him signed, then you say, okay, crap, well, good, we've got Justin Falk.
Someone would be willing to deal for Justin Falk, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, you could easily move him because, again, right-handed defensemen are not going to be, in plentiful this offseason. There's not a lot of guys. The only real names you have out there are Kevin Shattenkirk, Dustin Byfuglien, and maybe you throw in like a Luke Schenn or, Zach Bogosian, but that's about it. There's not going to be a lot of righties on the market, especially guys who can play in a top 4 role.
Sure. Now, the question is, to me, is more, all right, Alexander Steen, 17 points in the regular season. He was a big no-for in the playoffs. And he only played 55 games. 55 games in the regular season is about all the way through this year. Bozak, 8 games, 2 assists. and only 29 points, really as their third line center. I got to think that you're looking at one of those guys first. I mean, they both have some kind of no trade clause. Steen is a full. Bozak submits a 10-team no trade. I mean, I think you're going to look there long before you're going to go, hey, let's trade away our number 3 defenseman, number 2 defenseman that we have. I mean, Justin Falk is basically a number 2 defenseman, but they're so deep on defense that he plays in the second pairing. He's definitely one of their top power play defensemen as well. I think you're looking there before you're ever going to look to deal a guy you've got locked up at a pretty friendly deal. Yeah, especially with the way the salary cap is going to be stagnant. It's a pretty decent deal for Falk. It takes him till he's about 34, which, at the end of that, it might not be great, but by that point, you're hoping to have won another Stanley Cup, maybe 2, if you can, as your St. Louis. That's your hope. But I just, those 2 guys have to be the priority to move, because you also have to re-sign Vince Dunn. And Vince Dunn's going to probably be able to grab $3.5 million, which, there's almost one of those guys just in and of itself. So we'll see what they do with Vince Dunn. But do you think that they re-sign Pietrangelo?
Oh boy, I feel less assured about this one than I do when I was so sure that Tavares was moving.
Apparently the Leafs are interested in Pietrangelo.
Oh, of course. Who wouldn't be at this point when you have a guy who's a Stanley Cup winning captain, right-handed
Sure.
I give it a 60% chance right now that he stays in St. Louis.
What's he going to sign for?
I think he's probably looking at around $7.5-8 million minimum.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he gets less than 9. Honestly,
I would be too. I think, okay, so you can look at guys like Carlson.
Depends on how many years.
If
you're going to load him up with a 7 or 8 year deal,
if he's staying in St. Louis, it's 8 years minimum.
Yeah, and 8 years takes you to 38, 39 years old.
Yeah, because I think if you're St. Louis, especially with the cap being so flat for the next few years, you got to convince him to take less money, and in order to do that, you're going to have to probably eat a couple years into his late 30s there. Yeah,
I mean, he's going to go, all right, I can sign a 5-year deal, maybe a 4-year deal at, let's say a 5-year deal, $9 million a year, $45 million bucks. You're not going to go take a $7 million deal for 8 years, or for 6 years or something. That's less. So 7 times 7. All right, so now you've worked an extra 2 years and you've only made an extra $4 million. I wonder what he'll do. I wonder if he'll get the 8 from St. Louis. I mean, that'll be the big question mark. I mean, not that you can't put a guy on long-term injury later on, and
which they might have to do with Tarasenko for a while to help. Next year,
5 months before they can even reevaluate him.
Right.
I mean, he is. I mean, likely this is. We're done seeing high-level Tarasenko ever again.
You hope not, but
you hope not.
More than possible.
Yeah.
Especially because it is that shoulder. I mean, I'm not no doctor, but that can't be good.
No. Do you just sell low and get rid of him and see if you can get $7.5 million?
Yeah. No, I think you hold on to the hopes that, because I think right now with the injury, since this is the second surgery here in the last year, most teams are going to be like, nope, I'll give you a 7th rounder. Maybe.
Yeah.
So not worth it. Just hope that he rebounds, hope that he gets something back and is, even a fraction of what he once was, and it'd still be okay.
Yeah, I mean, one thing with St. Louis as far as their goaltending goes, I think Binnington was fine in the regular season. He was an average goalie, which I think is probably about where we figured he'd be when he first came into the league. Like, okay, this guy can be fine, especially for such a good team. In the playoffs, he really struggled. His statistics for the playoffs are not pretty. 4.72 goals against and a 8.51 save percentage. He certainly struggled in those playoffs. But trading away Jake Allen, especially since Jake Allen did get a decent amount of starts in the regular season, is certainly saying we think Jordan Binnington is for sure our guy. And I mean, he's got one more year. I mean, after whatever this year's July 1st ends up being, I don't know what day that is, but they can sign Jordan Binnington to an extension.
Yeah, I think it's like October 10th or something like that. And the other concern now you have to think is who's going to play backup for St. Louis, right? Because I don't really think they have any big prospects coming up in the goaltending pipeline.
They've got Joel Hofer.
Joel Hofer.
It's just who's there.
Yeah, but maybe you go look towards, in my opinion, I think the smart move would be go look towards a UFA veteran guy, like a Craig Anderson, maybe a Mike Smith. See if you can't get him for $1-2 million.
Yeah, those cheap. Guys would come and, hey, you'll play 25, 30 games. Right. That's not bad. And, barring an injury, you'd be our starter. So that wouldn't be a bad gig, and you'd be playing on a pretty good defensive team. So
right, and a team that potentially is going to make a run at the Cup next year.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Montreal side of the Jake Allen deal, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we think Montreal needs to do in this offseason. They, of course, traded for Keith Kincaid, and now he's gone, and in they go and bring Jake Allen. Now have almost $15 million devoted to their goaltending. And what do you think about this deal from a Montreal perspective? I mean, the third-round pick, seventh-round pick, whatever. Getting Jake Allen, what's the point of this deal? Because they, same thing. Mike Smith, Craig Anderson, these are all guys who you could probably have for a couple million, which is far less than Jake Allen, plus you don't have to give up the third-round pick. What is the advantage of having a Jake Allen over a UFA goaltender out there?
I think now the advantage is you have a backup you can trust, right? You don't have to ride Carey Price for close to 70 games next season.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. And, I mean, granted, outside of that fluke stretch that Niemi had when he was playing backup a few years ago for Montreal.
When he was so bad all year, and we made fun of him every single day on our show.
We did. I think outside of that, they've had this carousel of goaltenders where they haven't been able to find anybody who can add some stability to the back end, and I think that adds confidence to the rest of your team because if Carey Price isn't in the net, you've got to tighten up a little bit back on that back end. You can't play as loose, and I think we saw these playoffs here that Montreal playing a little loose, they can, in their D being a little bit more active, they can go out and cause some damage. And if you got a guy who's a number two who, when Carey Price isn't playing, or, you can go out there and be confident in what you're doing. You don't have to worry. And not only that, but for Carey Price, and he gets some rest, right? Because it's obviously, the season probably won't start till, December, January, whenever they think it might. But your Carey Price, you get time to rest now, and then you're fresh for the postseason whenever that starts next year too.
Yeah. Is Montreal a real playoff team, or was this just kind of a one and done?
No, I think they're going to be a bubble team again. I think they're going to be a team that's going to push for, that 7-8 spot. But
I mean, it all depends on if they're able to bring anyone else in.
Sure, and that's the thing.
And Nick Suzuki, if we continue to see his development, I mean, he was fantastic in the playoffs. I thought Lehkonen looked better than he did in the regular season. I think they kind of remind me a little bit of the Red Wings when they were good enough to make the playoffs. And you're like, this team is like a whole bunch of bottom top six forwards. Like you're 5-6 in the top six for a lot of teams. Like no one on here scares you. No one on here is going to be mistaken for...
Datsuk still scares me. Let's just...
Well, Datsuk did, yes. But no one on here scares you, but there's enough depth on this team to where they can potentially get in the postseason and, push it a little bit.
And the great thing I love about this Montreal team is they have balance, right? They have a balance between grit and speed and skill. And guys like you talked about, Nick Suzuki are only developing and getting better when it comes to that skill. And if they can get a little bit more of that, and then with all this cap space they have, really the only guy they have to re-sign is Max Domi, who, again, he might, chew up a couple extra $1 million on top of the three.
I really don't think he's getting more than $4.5 million.
Sure, I pegged him around 5. So, even if he comes in at 5, that's still only a few more $1 million, and then they'll still have close to $10 million that they can go out and spend in the free agent market, and whether that means you bring in another guy in the back end because, again, you've got older guys like, Petrie and Weber that maybe you want to say, we don't want to ride you 30 minutes a night, so let's bring somebody else in who can be a top 4 guy. But again, this whole deal goes back to, you had the cap space right now to be able to hold on to that $4 million cap. And now the year after, obviously, Jake Allen's not going to re-sign there because, he's shown he can potentially be a starter, number 1, number 1B, in another team, so maybe he goes and signs with somebody else. We don't know where the goalie carousel is going to be again next year, but
and maybe you flip him.
And that's another thing too. You can get a decent draft pick, at the deadline next year, and not that they're not already loaded with draft picks. I mean, they got a first and 3 seconds, so they're gonna get some good prospects.
And 3/4 and 2/5, and then next year, I mean, they are loaded with picks. They've done a nice job at setting themselves up in that way.
Yeah, so they can go out and they can re-sign somebody else, but maybe Jake Allen really likes it there because he is from Montreal. I think he played juniors there or something like that. But maybe he's like, okay, shoot, well maybe I'll take a couple million less and stay here for long term. But
yeah, all right. In my opinion, Montreal next year, it'll appear that they take a step back, but they were way ahead of schedule, winning that first round against Pittsburgh, and it was the Carey Price show. I think we're still due to see a Montreal team fight for a playoff spot, ultimately miss one, and then the year after that, I think, depending on the development of some of these guys, they've got a good shot. As long as Shea Weber can keep playing the way he played in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, like Kokeniemi, right? Here's another young guy that can come in and develop, and that's what you want. You want these young guys to develop, and I hope, especially for Montreal Canadiens fans, you don't want Montreal going out and overspending on somebody in the free agent. Just because you have the cap space doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to keep yourself and keep your options open, because as the cap is not going to go up, there are going to be some teams that you could probably take advantage of.
Right.
Especially now headed into where you're going to, there's going to be the expansion draft again, and who knows what kind of funky things will be happening there. So, all right, well, let's go to probably the most surprising team to be out. Not that it's that big of a shocker that Tampa beat them, but it seems like Boston always manages to get through somehow, and the Bruins find themselves out in the second round, and they've got some hard future questions and some difficult questions on defense, with Torrey Krug becoming a UFA, Chara's a UFA, and they've got Rask and Halak, both UFAs after next year, along with David Krejci, which is probably a welcomed loss of salary. Although I think he'll probably re-sign just for far less.
Sure, no, I absolutely agree. David Krejci
he was pretty good in the playoffs.
Yeah. He was. I enjoyed. And the problem
12 points in 13 games. He was. He showed up.
And I talked about that with the depth in Boston playing against Tampa, right? But it seemed to be missing, and that's obviously why Boston wasn't able to prevail in this series. And David Krejci was there; he was producing, and obviously the top three-headed monster there was producing as well. But that's the other big question mark too: is can they go out and fill in with some depth? They've got guys that they don't have a lot of cap space to spend, and they've got guys coming off contracts that they would hope to try and keep. A Chara, a Krug, guys that they want still to stay around. But the question is, will they stay?
Sure.
Obviously, I think Krug is more likely to leave than anybody else, and Chara, if he wants to come back, they'll find a way to squeeze him in there. But the question is, will he come back? And that's a big piece still, if he retires, to lose, because he's still capable. I don't know if he's, obviously he's slowing down, but he's still capable of putting top 4 minutes in.
Yeah. It also, can you get David Backes working again? Is there a chance that maybe he'll
David Backes?
Or, no, I guess he's gone. He's his salary is retained. I see his name pop up on here.
It's still funny to talk about, though.
Yeah, what a terrible deal. Yeah, Boston. I think you want to see more out of Charlie McAvoy. I think his rookie season kind of made you think, oh, you're going to get this spectacular offensive player, and well, he is no slouch. I don't think he's been quite as great as maybe they thought he could be when he was playing with Chara, and maybe that's some of the issue playing with Chara. How much is Chara making an impact positively or negatively? Do you want to bring him back? At $2 million, it's hard not to bring your captain back. But these are probably going to be some decisions that are going to come up. Like, I can't see Chara playing past this next year.
Yeah.
I also wonder if he'll be back at all.
I would think, Yeah, he's probably got another year in him, and I think because Boston is still competitive, they can still vie for a title. I think that's motivation for him to come back.
Yeah, that's true. They still have the same core, and Bergeron, Pastrnak, Marchand, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, there's not a lot of pieces moving, but I like your question because, again, McAvoy, right? I think they want him to be a top 2 guy, but, as Chara ages, as Chara gets a little bit slower, right?
Well, he's going to get thrust into that with Torrey Krug being gone. Krug is gone.
That's the other big question mark, too. Can McAvoy step up and help, ease that loss of production? I don't know. I did like what I saw at times out of Brendan Carlo. I think he was fine. John Moore, a little disappointing for me these playoffs and this season. But they've got him extended for a few more years. So, if he doesn't improve and get better, you're kind of stuck with that contract. The other big question mark, too, for me is Tuukka Rask. I know what he's capable of. I know he's got solid numbers, but there's going to be a lot of finger pointing this offseason. You can't blame Halak for anything that happened during the playoffs. He stepped up. He did great.
Yeah, he did fine.
Yeah.
Tampa was just the better team.
No, absolutely. I agree. I think Tampa found a way to grind and finally found some balance between skill and, that hard-nosed hockey. Yeah. But, I think there's going to be a lot of people in Boston, obviously. We know their fans are pretty passionate, and I think there's going to be a lot of finger-pointing his way, sure. Is he to the point where he says, screw it, I don't need this here anymore, I want out.
Yeah, maybe.
And because he's a UFA after next season, so maybe does he say I'm not re-signing after this year, or maybe just say trade me now and get me out of here.
Yeah, I mean it would be to the Bruins' benefit to deal him now,
sure.
If they're going to deal him, but his $7 million cap hit, that doesn't bode easy to deal.
Yeah, and I could tell you there's probably a few teams that I think there are a few teams that are ready to compete or able to compete that I think would welcome him.
Sure.
And be able to take him. And even if they got to eat a couple...
one of the best goaltenders in the league.
Yeah, and even if they got to eat a couple $1 million, I think you can still find a way to move him. But I think that's going to be a big question mark for me because I'm curious, do they welcome him back in terms of a city, not necessarily a team, because I think the team's got nothing against him, and they know what they've got with this guy.
Yeah. Speaking of Torrey Krug, how likely is it... I'm going to give you two teams. How likely is it that he re-signs in Boston? Any chance? Is there any chance? And how likely is it that he signs in Detroit and comes home?
Yeah, I've been interested in that one. And
Detroit has $34.6 million in cap space next year.
Yeah, they've got some RFAs to re-sign, but yeah, they've got some need on defense.
Really
I think.
I mean, Mantha, Tyler Bertuzzi. I mean, those are the only guys that are going to get any decent type of raise on the offense.
Yeah, and they've got to go out and get a number 1 goaltender still, so that might cost them.
You think Howard will re-up there, or you think he's done?
You know what? Even if he re-ups, it's not going to be for more than a couple million. But I think they would.
You've got Bernier there. Yes.
No, I think, and especially Steve Yzerman. I think if you're ready to build, maybe you go out and try to. I don't want to say overpay, but maybe you try to give more term to a guy like maybe a Robin Leonard, or God forbid, I don't know about Jacob Markstrom if they could poach him, but. I'm sure they would take a swing at it, as will most teams. But as far as Torrey Krug is concerned, right, we try to have this Brian Rafalski type story coming back home.
Yeah.
That's a 50-50 chance because I think Torrey Krug, obviously, his market value in terms of the amount of money and term he gets is going to be based upon what Pietrangelo does if he hits the free agent market. If St. Louis can't get him re-signed.
And, I mean, Detroit has the money to throw at him. They could certainly overpay him, and it would be okay. The cap's not going to go up for 3 years, but are the Red Wings really going to be in a super competitive position in the next 3 years? Probably not. But by that 4th year, then the cap goes up.
Sure.
And they're likely competitive, and that's when some of these ELCs start to run out on some of your draft picks.
Yeah, I think Steve Yzerman's realistic. I don't think he's going to go out and overpay for a guy for the next few years.
He's not going to give him $8 million or anything.
No. But I mean, if you're going to give him 6 and 6, to me, I think that's still okay. I'm not against that because you got a guy who can quarterback a power play. Obviously, I think right now you're going to get some size with a guy like Maurice Schneider who's going to come into Detroit. So you're not maybe worried about finding a bigger guy to play.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see him getting less than $7 million. on the open market. Somebody will give it to him.
Yeah, you're probably right.
A 50-point guy in 61 games, 53 points in 64 games, 59 in 76. I mean, he's if healthy through the year, he's a 60-point defenseman, which is, in terms of offense, you're in the top 10 of all defensemen.
Yeah, but is he the type of guy where you're looking at no matter what team it is, and you're saying he can be a number one?
Like still a -4. He hasn't been a positive plus minus since 15-16.
No, and he kind of lacks that defensiveness that I think a lot of teams would expect in a number one type of defenseman. So I think maybe that might hurt his market value a little bit. And then two, I mean, ever since Jake Gardiner got 4 for 4, and we thought this guy would just rake in $7-8 million all day long. I'm a little hesitant.
I didn't think he'd get that much.
I thought he would get a lot more than he did.
5, but yeah, it was impressive that he only had 4. But that's just because he sat around and waited. Well,
maybe maybe we don't know what went behind the scenes, and he, again, was trying to get the best deal possible, and then teams were like, nope, no more. Sorry, this is
no
what
more
you're
money.
So, yeah, but I mean, I'm hesitant, especially with a smaller guy like that, to hand out a big contract.
Yeah,
unless your name's like Goudreau, but smaller guys, I would be hesitant too. And I think Steve Yzerman too, building something here. He doesn't want to go out, I think, and get free agents that are going to be gone in 4 or 5 years anyways. He wants guys that are going to be around for 10 years.
Sure.
So maybe he's a little bit more patient with guys.
Which, I mean, Torrey Krug, he's not a 10-year project, but 7. Yeah, he could be around in 7 and still be serviceable in 7 years.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears to end the show, and we'll just give our predictions for these Game 6s.
Ooh.
I mean, we're still sticking with our series predictions. I guess I have Colorado in 7, I think.
Yeah, you and I both. Yeah.
And then we both have the Islanders winning, and we both have the Vegas Golden Knights winning. I did say Vegas in 6. I think you had them sweeping, didn't you?
I'm going to pull it up right now. I think I did, actually.
Yeah. For Game 6, Colorado-Dallas, man, I got to say, I'm just rooting for Game 7s all the way. Like, we have not been treated to many Game 7s or final game. I think the Leafs and Columbus were the one in the preliminary round. And was there a Game 7 in the first round? Nope. I don't think there was, right? No. So it'd be nice if we got a slew of Game 7s to watch in a couple days when these all come back. So we'll see what Colorado and Dallas can do tonight. Probably by the time you're listening to this, you already know the result. But Philly, New York Islanders, and then Vegas and Vancouver play on the 3rd. So what are your predictions for this Game 6?
All right.
I want to get a score.
Call the series, and I'll tell you.
Colorado, Dallas.
All right.
I mean, we both called Colorado in 7, so I feel like you can't veer from that. I mean, it's still got a full-on shot of it, yeah?
Yeah.
Or are you gonna part ways? I
really want Colorado to win this because, again, I picked them to go to the Cup Finals to start the season and the start of the playoffs. And as much as I don't want to back down from that, I just can't because, again, you're on your 3rd string. I don't think Hutch has it in him to steal a second game for Colorado. And as much as I look at the Avalanche and look at their top guys, how well they are, I think outside of that, Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon line, Kadri's been the only one pulling his weight, who's been playing up to his level that he should be. And because of that, I don't think that the Avalanche have it in them to survive another game. And so I think Dallas is gonna win.
All right, calling Dallas in 6.
Yeah, I'll go 4-3.
Okay. These have all been pretty high scoring games, and if Colorado's going to win, now that their goaltending is down to the bottom of the absolute barrel, like they were in a barrel, they dug a hole through the barrel, and they're somewhere in a tunnel underneath. I'm going to say Colorado takes this 5-4 in OT.
Wow. Okay. Good.
Well,
good on them.
Landeskog scoring in overtime. There you go. Okay, Flyers, Islanders, headed Game 6.
Man, this is interesting. I watched
crazy little end to that last one.
It was, yeah, nice little tip. But the Flyers, I think, are starting to not necessarily figure out the Islanders, but I think they're realizing they can, because when the Islanders come back in their defensive zone, they're taking all 5 guys and they're sort of just trying to box out, and they leave that top, up at the circles open for you to take some shots and find some lanes outside, again, because they weren't
collapsing. And
right. Yeah. And they want to, those aren't necessarily, high chance, positions to shoot from. So,
Sure.
But I think Philly's trying to
Now they're getting bodies in front,
Yeah.
and they're trying to tip pucks. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think the bigger question mark right now is Sean Couturier. Does he come back? I know that knee on knee he took in the last game was brutal. It didn't look good. The prognosis is not positive right now. There's no official word if he's done or if he's coming back. And same goes for the Islanders, right? Barzal took a stick.
Yeah.
But from what I hear, it looks like he'll probably be back. And if that's all the same, I think, Flyers without Couturier don't survive. I think the Islanders end up taking it 2-1.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the Flyers going to struggle to score. I'm pulling for Game 7, so I'm going to say the Flyers pull it off. Carter Hart shuts out the Islanders tonight.
I love your optimism.
3-0.
Wow. All right.
An empty netter at the end there. Vancouver, Vegas. Vancouver, Thatcher Demko had a crazy game. He's the first goalie since 1997 when Jose Theodore won an elimination game in his first game in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, kudos to him for looking pretty dang good.
Yeah, 46 saves or something like that.
Yeah, 42 I think it was. Regardless, yeah. 40-plus saves is very impressive for a rookie to come in there and stave off elimination. I just think ultimately this Vegas team is too deep. Vancouver just is going to run out of gas on the back end, and their goaltending just won't be able to keep up for too many more games.
Yeah, it's hard. Those all right, you're down 3-1. You go into that game and you go, let's just see what happens. Mm-hmm. Oh, you win. Now you're suddenly in a game where if you win the next one, it's anyone's game. There's a little more pressure on that, and I think that Vegas is the better team. I'm still rooting for a Game 7. I want a Game 7 so bad, and I'd like Vancouver to win. I mean, they've been the team I've been cheering for in the West this whole time. So, I will say Vegas though. If I'm putting money on it, Vegas is going to take this one pretty handedly, like a 5-2.
Okay, yeah, I'll go Vegas, but 4-2.
Okay. All right. Well, we will next show we'll be likely breaking down the conference finals, and we'll also go through all the teams that have been eliminated, and we'll do what we did here today. So find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and let us know what you thought, and yeah, enjoy the games. Enjoy all 3 Game 7s. Yes, prophetic.